thought I was just going to watch sweet childhood moments of my son with our family. But then a fleeting image flashed across the screen, a moment that seemed meaningless and pulled me into a vortex of truth buried for decades. And when I realized what I was seeing, I knew all of our lives would never be the same again. That red jacket, that familiar walk, that blue pickup truck in the background. It couldn't be. My other son had been missing for 32 years. My name is Elaine Cooper, and at 68 years old, I've learned that silence can fill a room more completely than any conversation ever could. That's exactly what hung between my son Mark and me as he sat across from my living room, his wife Tara trying desperately to lighten the mood while their 2 children played on the floor with decades-old toys I'd kept in the attic. "Mom, the kids have never seen what their dad looked like as a baby," Tara said, her voice carrying that forced cheerfulness people use when they're trying to bridge a gap they don't understand. "Do you still have those old home videos?" Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. At 42, he looked so much like his father it sometimes took my breath away, the same sharp jawline, the same way of pressing his lips together when he was thinking. We'd been dancing around each other like this for years, polite strangers who happened to share blood. "They're in the hall closet," I said, rising from my chair, "along with the old camcorder." The truth was, I hadn't watched those videos in over a decade. They were from a different life, when our family of 4 had seemed whole and happy. Before Andrew disappeared, before Richard and I divorced, before everything fell apart. I returned with a dusty box of VHS tapes and the camcorder, its weight familiar in my hands. The children, Emma, 8, and Lucas, 6, immediately abandoned their toys, drawn to this ancient technology like it was some kind of artifact. "What is that, Grandma?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. "It's how we recorded videos before phones could do everything," I explained, setting it up with the small TV I kept in the corner. My hands remembered the motions even after all these years. The first tape showed Mark's 3rd birthday party. There he was, face covered in chocolate cake, Richard lifting him high in the air while I laughed behind the camera. My younger voice sounded foreign to me now, so full of joy, so unaware of what was coming. "Look at Dad's hair," Lucas giggled, pointing at Mark's baby curls. We watched several more tapes, Christmas mornings, first days of school, family barbecues, with each one. The atmosphere in the room shifted slightly. Mark relaxed into his chair. Tara squeezed his hand. Even I found myself smiling at memories I'd locked away. Then came the tape labeled, "Mark Football Season 1993. "Oh, I remember this," Mark said, leaning forward. "Junior year. We made it to state championships." The video opened with shaky footage of the high school football field. Teenage Mark in his number 12 jersey, warming up with his teammates, Richard's voice behind the camera, calling out encouragement. Everything seemed normal, exactly as I remembered it. But then the camera panned across the parking lot, capturing the crowd gathering for the game, and that's when I saw it. That's when everything changed. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable to a mother's eyes, was a figure in a red jacket getting into a dark blue pickup truck. The way he moved, the tilt of his head, the specific way he lifted his hand to push back his hair. I knew that gesture. I'd seen it 1,000 times. It was Andrew. My heart stopped. The tape was date-stamped October 15th, 1993. 3 weeks after the police had concluded Andrew had run away. 3 weeks after Richard convinced everyone our troubled 15-year-old had simply left home. But there he was, alive, getting into a truck I didn't recognize, in the parking lot of his twin brother's football game. "Mom?" Mark's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Mom, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare at that fleeting image on the screen, my mind racing through implications that threatened to shatter everything I thought I knew about the worst day of my life. "Rewind it," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Please, rewind it." Mark grabbed the remote. Confusion etched across his face. Mom, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. In a way, I had seen exactly that. There, I said, pointing at the screen as the footage played again. In the parking lot, the red jacket. The image flickered past again, just 3 or 4 seconds of background footage while Richard focused on Mark's warm-up routine. But those few seconds were seared into my brain now. The red jacket Andrew always wore. That distinctive way he moved. Athletic, but slightly favoring his left side from an old skateboarding injury. The dark hair that fell exactly like Mark's. Because they were identical twins. "Mom, I don't understand," Mark said, pausing the tape. "What are you looking at?" "That's Andrew," I said, my finger trembling as I pointed at the frozen image. "That's your brother." The room went silent. Even the children seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Tara gently ushered them to the kitchen with promises of cookies, leaving Mark and me alone with the ghost on the television screen. "Mom, that's not... It can't be." Mark's voice was careful, the tone he used when he thought I was having one of my episodes. The grief-stricken moments that had punctuated the years after Andrew's disappearance. Andrew was already gone by then. Dad said, "I know what your father said." The words came out sharper than I intended. "But look at the date stamp. October 15th. The police report said Andrew ran away September 24th. So why is he at your football game 3 weeks later?" Mark leaned closer to the screen, studying the blurry figure. I watched his face change as recognition dawned, the same features he shared with his twin becoming pale. "The truck," he said suddenly. "I don't recognize that truck." Neither did I. The dark blue pickup was unfamiliar, certainly not belonging to any of Andrew's friends we'd known. And there was something else, someone else, visible in the driver's seat. Just a shadow, but definitely a person, an adult from the size. "We need to watch the rest," I said, my hands shaking now. "Maybe there's a better angle. Maybe..." But the camera had already swung back to the field, Richard's voice cheering as Mark caught a practice pass. The rest of the tape showed nothing but the game, a victory I couldn't even remember anymore. "This doesn't make sense," Mark said, running his hands through his hair in a gesture so like Andrew's it made my chest tight. If Andrew was there, if he was that close, why didn't he come home? Why didn't he talk to us? The question I'd been afraid to form was taking shape in my mind, dark and terrible. Unless he couldn't... Mark looked at me sharply. "What are you saying?" "Your father was so insistent that Andrew ran away. He was the one who found the note. He was the one who told the police about Andrew's troubled behavior, about the fights they'd been having." The words tumbled out, years of suppressed doubts finally finding voice. But what if Andrew didn't run away? What if... "Stop!" Mark stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You can't seriously be suggesting that, Dad." "Look at the tape again," I said. "Look at who's standing near the truck." Mark returned reluctantly to the TV. I played the segment once more, this time freezing it at just the right moment. There, barely visible at the edge of the frame, was another figure. Taller, broader, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. But I knew that stance. That way of standing with weight shifted to one hip. It was Richard. "No," Mark said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, there has to be an explanation." 3 weeks. "Mark, your brother was somewhere for 3 weeks while we thought he'd run away. And your father..." My voice broke. "Your father was right there." Tara appeared in the doorway, the children nowhere in sight. "I put them in the guest room with my tablet," she said quietly. "What's going on?" Mark didn't answer. Still staring at the frozen image on the screen, I could see him processing, remembering things, recontextualizing moments from our past, the way Richard had handled the investigation, how quickly he'd wanted to move on, the fights I'd had with him about hiring a private investigator, fights that had contributed to our divorce 2 years later. "We have to call the police," Tara said after Mark explained what we'd seen. "This is evidence." "Evidence of what?" Mark turned on her, anguish clear in his voice. "A blurry video from 30 years ago, a shadow that might be my brother, another shadow that might be my father." But I was already reaching for my phone, my hands steady now with purpose. Because I knew what I'd seen. A mother knows her child, even in a decades-old, grainy video. Andrew had been alive 3 weeks after he'd supposedly run away, and Richard had been there. The question that terrified me now was simple. What had happened next? "Put the phone down, Mom." Mark's voice was strained. "Let's think about this rationally before we do anything we can't take back." I lowered the phone but didn't set it aside. Rationally? Your brother has been missing for 32 years, and I just saw evidence he was alive weeks after we were told he ran away. "You saw a figure in a red jacket," Mark countered, "from 50 yards away, in 30-year-old footage. That could be anyone." "You recognized him too. I saw it in your face." Mark slumped back onto the couch, his defenses crumbling. Tara sat beside him, taking his hand. The gesture was tender, supportive, and it made me realize how alone I'd been with my suspicions all these years. "Tell me about the fights," Tara said gently. "Between Andrew and your father?" Mark was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, remembering. They were bad, worse than Mom knew. I think Andrew had started questioning everything. Why Dad was gone so much. Why there was tension between our parents. He was smarter than me about that stuff. More observant. I felt my throat tighten. "What do you mean, worse than I knew?" "Andrew found something," Mark said slowly. "The week before he disappeared, papers in Dad's office. He wouldn't tell me what exactly, but he was upset. Really upset. He said Dad was lying about something big." This was new information. In 32 years, Mark had never mentioned this. "Why didn't you tell the police?" "Because Dad convinced me Andrew was just being dramatic, that he was making up stories because he was angry about the divorce talks." Mark's voice turned bitter, and I believed him. I was 15 and scared, and I believed him. "Divorce talks?" I stood abruptly. "We weren't talking about divorce then. Not until after Andrew." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "Oh my God." "What?" Tara looked between us, confused. "Richard filed for divorce 18 months after Andrew disappeared. He said he couldn't handle the grief, that being together just reminded him of what we'd lost." I laughed, but it was a harsh sound. But he'd already been preparing, hadn't he? Whatever Andrew found... "Stop!" Mark's voice was desperate now. "You're building a conspiracy theory out of shadows and suppositions." "Then explain the truck," I challenged. "Explain why your father was standing next to a vehicle I'd never seen before, with your supposedly runaway brother getting into it. Maybe he was trying to help. Maybe he found Andrew and was trying to convince him to come home." "Without telling me? Without telling the police?" I shook my head. "Your father controlled that entire investigation. He was the one who found Andrew's note, typed, not handwritten. He was the one who told police about Andrew's behavioral problems that I'd never seen. He even convinced them not to issue an Amber Alert because Andrew was a runaway, not a missing child." Tara had pulled out her laptop and was typing rapidly. "The statute of limitations on kidnapping." "There is none," I said flatly. "I looked it up. Many times." The room fell silent again, the weight of implications pressing down on us. Mark stared at the frozen image on the TV screen, and I could see him wrestling with loyalty to his father and the growing realization that something terrible had happened. "He took my Lincoln last month," Mark said suddenly. "What?" I turned to him, confused by the apparent non sequitur. "Dad, he visited last month, first time in 2 years. Said his car was in the shop. Borrowed my Lincoln for a day, but Tara saw him at a gas station in his own car that same afternoon." Tara nodded. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to cause drama by mentioning it. "He was in my house alone," Mark continued, his voice growing stronger. "Had access to everything, including..." He stood abruptly, heading for the hallway. "Including what?" I followed him, Tara close behind. Mark went to the hall closet where I'd retrieved the videos. On the top shelf was another box, one I'd forgotten about. He pulled it down, dust swirling in the afternoon light. "After the divorce, You gave me a box of things to keep. Said it was stuff from when Andrew and I were kids that you couldn't bear to look at anymore." He opened the box, rifling through report cards, baseball trophies, school photos. But there was also this. He pulled out a manila envelope, worn and yellowed with age. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Bank statements, hotel receipts, all in Richard's name, all from the months after Andrew's disappearance. "Why would Dad put these in a box of childhood memories?" Mark asked. But we both knew the answer. He'd hidden them where he thought no one would look. And if he'd borrowed Mark's car to retrieve them last month... "He knows," I said quietly. "Somehow, he knows we're getting close to the truth." As if in response to my words, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but the message made my blood run cold. "Some things are better left buried, for everyone's sake." Mark read it over my shoulder, his face going pale. "How did he—" "He's watching," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "He's been watching all along." Tara was already dialing on her phone. "That's it. We're calling the police. Now." This time, neither Mark nor I argued, because I knew with absolute certainty Richard had taken Andrew 32 years ago, and if he was threatening us now, it meant Andrew might still be alive. The only question was whether we could find him before Richard made sure he stayed buried forever. The police officer who arrived seemed skeptical at first, but her demeanor changed when I showed her the box from my closet, not the one with videos, but the one I'd hidden for 3 decades. "You hired a private investigator?" Officer Martinez asked, studying the thick folder I'd retrieved. "Harold Vance," I confirmed. "He worked the case for 2 years before he died in a car accident. I'd never believed that accident was really an accident, but I kept that thought to myself." The folder contained everything Harold had gathered before his death. Bank statements showing large cash withdrawals from Richard's accounts, hotel receipts from Nevada, always paid in cash, phone records with calls to numbers in Colorado and California. Most damning of all, receipts for a property rental near Lake Tahoe, starting just 1 week after Andrew's disappearance. "This is substantial," Officer Martinez said, photographing each document. "But it's also circumstantial and decades old. We'll need more to—" Her words were cut off by Mark's phone ringing. He looked at the screen and paled. "It's Dad." "Answer it," Officer Martinez instructed. "Act normal. Put it on speaker." Mark's hand shook as he accepted the call. "Hey, Dad." "Mark." Richard's voice filled the room, still carrying that authoritative tone I remembered too well. "I heard you're at your mother's house." "Yeah, just visiting with the kids. How did you—" "I think it's time we had a talk, all of us, about Andrew." The room went absolutely still. Even Officer Martinez seemed to hold her breath. "What about Andrew?" Mark managed. "Don't play dumb, son. I know what you found. What you think you found." A pause. "Your mother always was too persistent for her own good. Even hired that investigator. Shame what happened to him." I bit my lip to keep from gasping. He'd just admitted to knowing about Harold. "Where are you, Dad?" Mark asked. "Close enough. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop this nonsense right now. You're going to send that police officer away. Yes, I know she's there. And you're going to forget whatever wild theory your mother has concocted." "Or what?" The words burst from me before I could stop them. Richard chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Hello, Elaine. Still causing trouble after all these years. You want to know or what? Or I disappear, permanently, and you'll never know what really happened to Andrew." "You son of a—" "Careful," Richard interrupted. "I'm the only one who knows where your boy is. Push me, and that knowledge dies with me." Officer Martinez was gesturing frantically, mouthing, "Keep him talking," while typing rapidly on her phone. "Is he alive?" My voice cracked on the words I'd been afraid to ask for 32 years. "Is Andrew alive?" The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, "That depends entirely on what you do next." "You bastard," Mark breathed, and I heard years of defended loyalty crumble in those 2 words. "You took him. You actually took my brother. I saved him, Richard snapped. From her, from a life of being coddled and weakened. Andrew had potential. He just needed proper guidance. Guidance? I was standing now, rage burning through me. You kidnapped a 15-year-old boy. I relocated my son, Elaine. The courts were going to give you custody in the divorce, weren't they? Those papers Andrew found, they were from my lawyer. Strategies to prevent you from taking my boys away. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Richard had been planning to divorce me but knew he'd lose custody. So he'd taken Andrew before the proceedings could begin, hidden him somewhere, then played the grieving father. But why not me, too? Mark's question was anguished. Why leave me behind? Because taking both boys would have triggered a nationwide manhunt. One troubled runaway? That dies down, but twins disappearing together. Richard made a dismissive sound. Besides, you were always more like your mother. Soft. Andrew was stronger. Where is he? I demanded. Safe. Has been for 32 years. New name. New life. Hell, he barely remembers you anymore. Officer Martinez held up her phone, showing me a message. Keep him talking. Tracing call. I want to see him. I said, I want proof he's alive. You had proof. That video you found. Though I must admit, I thought I'd destroyed all the tapes from that time. Careless of me. The football game, Mark said slowly. You brought Andrew to watch me play? He begged me. Kept saying he missed his brother. I thought seeing you from a distance might help him let go. Instead, it made things complicated. My mind raced. Complicated. What had happened after that day? The investigation's been reopened, Officer Martinez said loudly, apparently deciding subterfuge was over. Mr. Cooper, you need to turn yourself in. Richard laughed. Good luck with that, officer. I've had 32 years to prepare for this day. Richard, please. I tried one more time. Just tell me where he is. Let me see my son. Your son? His voice turned vicious. You lost the right to call him that when you tried to turn him against me, when you filled his head with your weakness. Dad, Mark interrupted, if you ever loved either of us, tell us where Andrew is. Please. Another long silence. Then, Lake Tahoe, Serenity Pines Lodge, Cabin 12. But you better hurry. Elaine, Andrew's been having some difficulties adjusting to the idea that his loving father might not be who he thought. Stress is bad for his heart. You know, all those years of medication to keep him calm and compliant, they do take a toll. The line went dead. Medication? I turned to Officer Martinez. Horror dawning. He's been drugging him? But she was already on her radio, calling for backup and an ambulance to head to Lake Tahoe. It's a 4-hour drive, she said. We can have local units there and... No. I grabbed my keys. I'm not waiting. Not again. Mark stood with me. I'm coming too. Sir, ma'am, I can't let you... But we were already moving. 32 years of waiting, of not knowing, of living with a hole where my son should have been. I wasn't waiting another minute. As we rushed to my car, my phone buzzed with another text from Richard. You always were predictable. Elaine, see you soon. It felt like a trap. I didn't care. Andrew was alive, and nothing, not Richard, not the police, not even God himself, was going to keep me from my son again. The first hour of driving passed in tense silence. Mark gripping the dashboard as I pushed my old Honda to its limits. Tara had stayed behind with the children and Officer Martinez, promising to coordinate with the police and keep us updated. Mom, slow down, Mark said as I took a curve too fast. We won't help Andrew if we die on the way there. He was right. I eased off the accelerator, my hands trembling on the wheel. I'm sorry, 32 years. Mark, he's been alive all this time. I know. Mark's voice was thick with emotion. I can't stop thinking about all the birthdays, all the Christmases. Did Dad visit him? Did Andrew think about us? My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Tara's name appeared on the screen. You need to know something, she said without preamble. I've been researching property records. Serenity Pines Lodge isn't just some rental. Richard owns it, has since 1994. He bought property with my son locked inside it? The words tasted like poison. It gets worse. The lodge is registered as a private rehabilitation facility, licensed for troubled youth requiring intensive therapeutic intervention. I nearly drove off the road. Mark grabbed the wheel, helping me steady the car. He's been holding Andrew in some kind of fake treatment center? Mark's voice was rising. For 30 years? The paperwork all looks legitimate, Tara continued. Private facility, no public records of patients, and Elaine. There are staff members, people who've been employed there for decades. My mind reeled. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was an elaborate, decades-long imprisonment involving multiple people. How many had known my son was there against his will? How many had helped Richard maintain this sick charade? There's more, Tara said. I found employment records. One name keeps appearing. Dr. Patricia Morse. She's listed as the primary physician. Mark. I looked her up. She lost her medical license in 1992 for overprescribing sedatives to minors. And the medication, I breathed. Richard mentioned medication. We were 2 hours from Lake Tahoe when I noticed the black SUV. It had been following us for the last 30 miles, maintaining a steady distance. Mark, I said quietly, we have company. He turned to look, then quickly faced forward. Take the next exit. Let's see if they follow. I did. The SUV exited too, staying 3 cars back. My phone immediately rang. Unknown number. Don't answer, Mark warned, but I'd already accepted the call. You're making a mistake, Elaine. Richard's voice filled the car again. Turn around now, and we can all walk away from this. Never. You think you're saving him? You have no idea what you're walking into. Andrew isn't the boy you remember. 32 years of treatment have been necessary to keep him stable. Treatment? I spat the word. You mean imprisonment? Drugging? I mean saving his life. Richard shot back. He was unstable, Elaine, violent. The things he said he'd do if I didn't let him leave, he would have hurt people. Hurt himself. I did what I had to do to protect him. Liar. But a cold fear was creeping into my chest. What if the drugs, the isolation, the years of captivity had damaged Andrew beyond repair? The boy you're racing to save doesn't exist anymore, Richard continued, as if reading my thoughts. The man in cabin 12 is someone else entirely. Someone who's been told for 3 decades that his mother abandoned him, that his brother forgot him, that I'm the only one who cared enough to keep him safe from himself. You're sick, Mark said, his voice shaking with rage. Am I? Or am I a father who made an impossible choice? The SUV was getting closer now. Last chance. Both of you. Turn around. Go to hell, I said and hung up. The SUV accelerated, pulling alongside us. The passenger window rolled down, and I glimpsed a face I recognized from the employment records Tara had found. Dr. Patricia Morse, her gray hair pulled back severely, her expression grim. Pull over, she shouted over the wind. You don't understand what you're doing. I pressed harder on the accelerator. Mark was on his phone with 911 giving our location, describing the vehicle pursuing us. But we were still an hour from Lake Tahoe, still too far from help. The SUV swerved suddenly, trying to force us toward the shoulder. I fought to maintain control, adrenaline flooding my system. This was it, Richard's final attempt to stop us. Mom, watch out! I saw the spike strip too late. The SUV had dropped it across our lane, and there was nowhere to go. Our front tires exploded, the car lurching violently to the right. I wrestled with the wheel, pumping the brakes, managing to bring us to a sliding stop on the shoulder. The SUV pulled up behind us. Richard stepped out, looking older than I remembered, but still carrying himself with that infuriating confidence. Doctor. Morse followed, along with 2 large men I didn't recognize. I tried to do this the easy way, Richard said, approaching slowly. But you always were too stubborn for your own good, Elaine. Mark was already out of the car, putting himself between Richard and me. Stay back. The police are on their way. 20 minutes out, at least, Richard said calmly. More than enough time. Enough time for what? I demanded, standing beside my son, the one I still had. Richard's expression was almost sad. To make you understand, to show you why this has to stay buried. He pulled out his phone, turning it toward us. On the screen was a live video feed, a small, sparse room. And in the corner, sitting on a narrow bed, was a man who looked exactly like Mark, but wrong somehow. Thin, pale, his eyes unfocused. Andrew, my baby boy, 47 years old and looking like a ghost. He's watching us right now, Richard said. One word from me, and he'll take every pill in that bottle beside his bed. He's done it before when he thought I'd abandoned him. Do you want your reunion to be in a morgue, Elaine? The world tilted. After everything, it came down to this. Another impossible choice. Another way for Richard to maintain control. But this time, I was ready for him. You're bluffing, I said, though my voice shook. You wouldn't let him die. He's your leverage. Richard's smile was cold. You're right, but I don't need him to die. Just attempt it. Another overdose. Another round of intensive treatment. Another year or two before he's stable enough for visitors. How old will you be then, Elaine? 70? 75? On the screen, Andrew suddenly looked up, as if hearing something. His lips moved, and though there was no audio, I could read them clearly. Dad? He's waiting for my call, Richard said. Our nightly check-in. If I don't call in the next 10 minutes, he knows something's wrong. And when Andrew knows something's wrong, he let the threat hang. You've tortured him, Mark said, his voice breaking. Your own son. I've protected him. From himself. From a world that wouldn't understand. Richard's composure cracked slightly. You think I wanted this? You think I planned to spend 30 years managing a facility, monitoring medications, ensuring staff loyalty? I did it because I'm his father. No, I said, finding strength in my rage. You did it because you're a coward, because you couldn't face losing custody, because your ego mattered more than your children. Doctor, Moore stepped forward. Mr. Cooper, we should go. The authorities... Quiet. Richard didn't even look at her. Elaine, I'm offering you a deal. Walk away now. Let Andrew continue his treatment in return. I'll allow supervised visits. Once a month, you can see him, talk to him, but within the controlled environment he needs. Controlled environment? Mark laughed bitterly. You mean prison? I mean structure, routine, the medications that keep him balanced. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. That's odd. Suddenly, sirens became audible in the distance, but they were coming from the wrong direction, from ahead of us, not behind. Richard's frown deepened. That's not possible. The nearest station is... His phone rang. The screen showed a video call from the facility. He answered it, and we could all see Andrew's face fill the screen. Dad? Andrew's voice was thin, confused. There are police here. They're in the building. Doctor. Morse isn't answering her phone. Richard spun to face the doctor, but she was backing away, her hands raised. I'm sorry. Richard, I can't do this anymore. When they called about a medical emergency at the facility, I told them everything. You bitch! 30 years, she said quietly. 30 years of watching that boy deteriorate, of increasing dosages to keep him compliant, of lying to myself that it was for his own good. She looked at me. I called them 20 minutes ago. They've been in the building for the last 10. On the screen, Andrew was standing now, looking off screen. They want me to come with them. Dad, what do I do? You always tell me what to do. Richard's carefully constructed world was crumbling. The sirens were getting louder, multiple vehicles converging on our location. The two men who'd come with them were already retreating to the SUV. Andrew, I called out, moving closer to the phone. Andrew, baby, it's Mom. His face went blank, then confused. My mother is dead. Dad said. I'm not dead, sweetheart. I've been looking for you. All these years. I never stopped looking. No. Andrew shook his head violently. No, you're lying. Dad said you didn't want me. Said I was too difficult, too angry. Said you chose Mark. "That's not true," Mark said, stepping into view. "None of it's true. We've missed you every single day." Andrew stared at his twin through the screen, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition. Maybe. Or just the ghost of memory. Mark. "Yeah, buddy, it's me." The first police car crested the hill, followed by two more. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, ordering Richard to step away from us. But he wasn't watching them. He was watching his son on the screen, watching Andrew's face transform as understanding began to dawn. "You lied," Andrew said quietly. "All these years, the medications, the locks, you lied." "I protected you," Richard insisted, even as officers moved to surround him. "You were sick. Andrew, you needed help." "I needed my family." The scream was primal, 30 years of suppressed rage breaking free. "I needed my mother, my brother. I needed to be free." Richard dropped the phone as officers pulled his arms behind his back. I snatched it up, desperate to maintain the connection with my son. "Andrew, listen to me. The police are there to help. Go with them. We're coming, baby. Mark and I are coming to get you." "Is it real?" His voice was small now, childlike. "Are you real?" "I'm real. And I love you. I've loved you every day since you were born." "Doctor." Morse was also being arrested, but she called out, "His medications. He can't stop them abruptly. Tell the paramedics. Risperidone, 15 milligrams. Lorazepam, 6 milligrams. Daily for 15 years. He'll need supervised withdrawal." I memorized every word, even as my heart broke at the dosages. They'd kept my son chemically restrained for half his life. On the screen, uniformed officers were speaking gently to Andrew, coaxing him to come with them. He looked back at the camera one more time. "Mom?" The word was tentative. "Testing. Will you really come?" Nothing could stop me, I promised. The feed cut as he finally stood to leave with the officers. I lowered the phone, my legs suddenly weak. Mark caught me, holding me up as the reality crashed over us. Andrew was alive. Andrew was free. After 32 years, my son was coming home. But as I watched Richard being placed in the police car, his eyes meeting mine through the window, I knew our fight wasn't over. The man in that facility wasn't the 15-year-old who'd vanished. He was someone else now, someone damaged by decades of lies and drugs and isolation. The revenge I'd wanted for so long suddenly seemed hollow. Destroying Richard wouldn't give Andrew back his lost years. It wouldn't erase the medications or the manipulation or the crushing loneliness he must have endured. But it was a start. "Come on," Mark said gently. "Let's go get our brother." I nodded, leaning on him as we walked to a police car. One officer was already arranging transportation to Lake Tahoe. Another was coordinating with the team at the facility. Revenge would come later, in courtrooms and testimonies and justice served cold. Right now, all that mattered was a reunion 32 years in the making. The police drove us to Lake Tahoe, sirens clearing our path through the mountain roads. I clutched Mark's hand the entire way, my mind spinning with questions. What would Andrew look like up close? Would he recognize us? Would he even want to see us after believing we'd abandoned him for over 3 decades? When we finally arrived at Serenity Pines Lodge, my breath caught. It looked so ordinary, a collection of log buildings nestled among pine trees, more like an upscale retreat than a prison. But the police tape and emergency vehicles shattered that illusion. "He's in the medical building." Officer Martinez met us at the entrance. She'd arrived minutes before us. "The paramedics are evaluating him now. It's going to take time. Mrs. Cooper." "I need to see him." "I know, but we need to prepare you first." She led us to a small office where a paramedic was waiting. "This is James. He's been with Andrew for the last hour." James, a kind-faced man in his 30s, gestured for us to sit. "Your son is physically stable, but he's heavily medicated and showing signs of long-term institutional behavior. He's cooperative, but very confused. He keeps asking if this is another test." "Test?" Mark asked. Apparently, Richard would sometimes stage false rescues to see if Andrew would try to leave. When he did, It would result in increased medication and restricted privileges. James's expression was grim. It's a common psychological torture technique. Your son doesn't trust that this is real. I felt sick. Every time I thought I understood the depth of Richard's cruelty, another layer revealed itself. Can we see him? I asked. James nodded. But go slowly. Don't expect too much. Right now. He's 47 years old chronologically, but emotionally and socially, he's still very much the traumatized teenager who was brought here. He led us down a hallway lined with locked doors. Through small windows, I glimpsed sparse rooms, each one identical. Bed, chair, small bathroom. How many others had Richard held here over the years? At the end of the hall, a door stood open. Inside, sitting on a medical examination table, was my son. The resemblance to Mark was still there, but distorted as if seen through murky water. Andrew was thinner, his hair prematurely gray at the temples. His posture was hunched, protective, but it was his eyes that broke my heart, flat and distant, like he'd learned to retreat somewhere deep inside himself. "Andrew?" I spoke softly from the doorway. He looked up, studying my face with detached curiosity. "You're older than in the pictures." "Pictures?" Dad showed me pictures sometimes, of before, you and Mark and me. His voice was monotone, affected by years of medication. He said you died in a car accident when I was 18. I stepped into the room slowly. Mark beside me. "I didn't die. Sweetheart, I've been here all along, looking for you." Andrew's gaze shifted to Mark, and something flickered in his expression. "You look like me, but successful." "I'm not," Mark's voice cracked. "I'm just me, Andrew, your brother. Do you remember? We used to build forts in the backyard, play catch until Mom called us for dinner." "I remember some things." Andrew touched his temple. "But the medicine makes it hard, doctor. Morse says the memories that hurt get locked away. It's better that way." "No," I said firmly. "It's not better. Those memories are yours, the good and the bad. They're what make you who you are." Andrew tilted his head, considering this. Then, without warning, he asked, "Why didn't you come?" The question I dreaded. I tried. "Oh, baby, I tried everything. The police, private investigators. I never stopped." "No," he shook his head. "I mean that day. The day with the red jacket, at Mark's game." My heart stopped. "You remember that?" "Dad said we could watch, just for a few minutes. I wanted to run to you, but he said you wouldn't want to see me, that you were happy with just Mark, that I would ruin everything." His hands twisted in his lap. "Then we came here, and he said it was for the best, that I was too damaged for the real world." "None of that was true," Mark said fiercely. "Mom cried for you every single day. We both did. Christmas, birthdays, graduation. There was always this hole where you should have been." Andrew processed this slowly, like someone translating a foreign language. "Dad lied?" "About everything," and I confirmed. "You were never damaged, never unwanted. He took you because he was going to lose custody in the divorce. He couldn't stand the thought of not controlling us." "The divorce that didn't happen until 2 years later," Andrew said quietly, "because you were too busy looking for me." I moved closer, aching to touch him but afraid of overwhelming him. Can I hug you?" He tensed, then slowly nodded. I wrapped my arms around my son for the first time in 32 years, feeling how thin he was, how his body stayed rigid before gradually, incrementally relaxing into the embrace. "It doesn't feel real," he whispered against my shoulder. "I know, baby, but it is. You're free now." When I pulled back, there were tears on his face, the first emotion beyond confusion I'd seen. Mark stepped forward, offering his hand. Andrew stared at it for a long moment before taking it. "Twins?" Andrew said softly. "We were twins." "We still are," Mark assured him. "Nothing can change that." A knock on the door interrupted us. Officer Martinez entered with a man in a suit. "This is District Attorney Morrison. He needs to ask Andrew some questions, but—" "It can wait," I said sharply. "Actually, it can't," Morrison said, not unkindly. We have Richard Cooper in custody, but he's already lawyering up. We need Andrew's statement while everything is fresh." Andrew shrank back. I can't testify against Dad. He'll be angry. He can't hurt you anymore," I promised. "He's going to prison for what he did." "Prison?" Andrew looked genuinely confused. "But he was helping me, keeping me safe. That's what he always said." Morrison and Officer Martinez exchanged glances. This would be harder than anyone had anticipated. 32 years of brainwashing couldn't be undone in an hour. "Andrew," Mark said gently, "do you want to be free, to leave this place and never come back?" Andrew's response was immediate. "Yes." Then, quieter. "But I don't know how. I don't know anything except here." "That's okay," I said. "We'll figure it out together. All of us. As a family." Family. Andrew repeated the word like he was tasting it. Dad always said family was just the two of us, that everyone else would hurt me. "Dad was wrong," Mark said simply, "and we're going to prove it to you, every single day until you believe it." Andrew looked between us, then at the officials waiting in the doorway. Finally. He straightened his shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of the determined teenager I'd lost that it took my breath away. "Okay," he said, "I'll tell them. Everything, all of it." It was just the beginning. There would be months of testimony, therapy, and learning to navigate a world he'd been isolated from since adolescence. The damage Richard had done couldn't be erased. But as I watched my son sit side by side, Mark's hand steady on Andrew's shoulder while he began to speak his truth, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 32 years. Hope. The courtroom was packed the day Richard was sentenced. 6 months had passed since that night at Serenity Pines. 6 months of revelations that shocked even the seasoned prosecutors. The facility had housed 12 other patients over the years, all young people whose parents had paid Richard to make their problem children disappear. Each one had been found, traumatized but alive, their families thinking they'd run away or died. Andrew sat between Mark and me, his hands steady now. The medications had been carefully reduced under proper medical supervision, and while he still struggled with anxiety and trust, glimpses of the boy I'd raised were emerging more each day. Richard stood as the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, fraud, conspiracy. The list went on. When the judge pronounced the sentence, life without possibility of parole, Richard finally looked at us. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret? Fear? But then his jaw set in that familiar, stubborn line, and I knew he'd never truly understand what he'd stolen from us. "Andrew Cooper," the judge said, "would you like to make a statement?" Andrew stood slowly. He'd written and rewritten his words dozens of times. Practicing with his therapist, his voice was clear as he spoke. "You told me every day that you saved me, that the world outside would destroy me, that my family didn't want me." He paused, looking directly at Richard. "But you were the one who destroyed me. You stole 32 years of my life. You made me afraid of love, of freedom, of my own thoughts." Richard's lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but he shrugged it off, leaning forward as if to speak. "But you failed," Andrew continued, stronger now. "Because I'm here, I'm free, and I have my family back. You controlled my body, my mind, my environment for decades, but you never controlled my soul. Somewhere deep inside, I always knew the truth. I was loved, I was wanted, I belonged somewhere else." He sat down, and I took his hand, on his other side. Mark did the same, united again, after all these years. The bailiffs led Richard away. He didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions, but we slipped out the side entrance, just the three of us. Tara had offered to bring the children, but Andrew wasn't ready for crowds yet. Small steps. "So what now?" Andrew asked as we walked to my car. "Now we go home," I said simply. "Your room is ready, although I guess you'll want to redecorate. Baseball posters from 1993 probably aren't your style anymore." A smile, rare but becoming more frequent, crossed his face. Actually, I wouldn't mind seeing them, like a time capsule. Everything's a time capsule with Mom, Mark teased. She kept everything. Your trophies, your clothes, even that terrible poetry you wrote in 8th grade. I wrote poetry? Andrew seemed genuinely surprised. Terrible poetry, Mark emphasized. Lots of angst about girls and homework and why the world didn't understand you. So, normal teenager stuff, Andrew said quietly. Exactly, I confirmed. You were beautifully, wonderfully normal. We drove home in comfortable silence. Andrew still struggled with too much conversation, too much stimulation. But he was trying, and that was everything. As we pulled into the driveway of my small house, Andrew studied it carefully. I think I remember this. The blue door, the garden. The garden's a bit overgrown now, I admitted. I haven't had the heart to tend it properly since I left, Andrew finished. Maybe we could work on it together? I had to help with the grounds at the facility. It was one of the few things I enjoyed. I'd love that. Inside. Andrew walked slowly through each room, touching furniture, studying photos. When he reached the hallway, he stopped at a particular picture, him and Mark at 14, arms slung around each other's shoulders, identical grins. We were happy, he said, wonder in his voice. We were, Mark agreed, and we will be again. The truth was, it wouldn't be easy. Andrew had night terrors, panic attacks, days when the real world felt too big, too bright, too much. He struggled with technology, with social interactions, with the simple act of making choices after decades of having every decision made for him. But he was trying. Therapy 3 times a week, slow reintegration into society, learning to trust that this freedom was real and permanent. 3 weeks after the trial, I found him in the garden at dawn, planting tomatoes. Couldn't sleep? I asked, joining him in the dirt. Dreams, he said simply, but good ones this time. About before. Tell me. Mark and I were building a fort. You were making lemonade. Dad was... He paused. Dad wasn't there. It's better that way. I worked beside him in silence for a while before he spoke again. I'm 47 years old, and I don't know how to be an adult. I don't know how to have a job or pay bills or go on a date. Sometimes I feel like I'll never catch up. You don't have to catch up, I said firmly. You just have to move forward, one day at a time. Is that enough? I thought about the 32 years of searching, of hoping, of refusing to give up. I thought about the moment I'd seen that flash of red jacket on an old video. I thought about Richard in his cell, alone with the consequences of his choices. It's everything, I told my son. Later that morning, Mark arrived with Tara and the kids. Andrew was still learning to be an uncle, still nervous around the children. But Emma had taken to bringing him books, sitting quietly beside him while he read. Small connections, baby steps toward a family Richard had tried to destroy. As I watched my sons in the garden, teaching Emma and Lucas to plant seeds, I realized something. The revenge I'd craved for so long had come, but not in the form I'd expected. It wasn't in Richard's imprisonment or the dissolution of his empire of lies. It was in this, Andrew's laughter as Lucas accidentally sprayed him with the hose, Mark's protective arm around his brother's shoulders, the slowly healing family in my backyard, growing like the garden we tended together. Richard had stolen 32 years, but he hadn't stolen our love, and in the end, that love was the greatest revenge of all. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth where we knelt together. Andrew looked up at me, soil on his hands, peace in his eyes for the first time since he'd come home. Thank you, he said simply, for never giving up. Never, I promised, not for a single day. And I meant it. Every sleepless night, every false lead, every year that passed without answers, it had all led to this moment, my family, broken but healing, together at last. The revenge was complete. The healing had just begun. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on Elaine's journey. What would you have done in her place? Your insights make our storytelling community special.